Thank you for joining us on My Business Your World. I'm your host, Dr. Corinne Graham. We're a management consulting firm that focuses on the operation of business to help them become more successful and profitable. Today, our guest is Mr. Zev Ash, and Zev tagline is differentiate or stop growing. Zev focuses on methods to help businesses grow and develop a market position that protects the customer loyalty and ensures sustainable growth. Zev has over 30 years of experience in marketing, sales, management, business development. His background is in high-tech and medical devices and service industry. He's also an ISO certified trainer, auditor, I beg your pardon, and he's hired and trained and developed sales, direct and indirect sales reps. He's accomplished a 14% growth for a medical device manufacturer, and he's also, in 2011, he helped to launch 8 companies in Europe, starting with the German in Germany. The company was in Germany, the location?
Right.
Okay. Zev is an avid MOVEit fan and also a FIFA
soccer ref. Yes.
Soccer ref. He lives on Long Island with his wife, Lisa, who's very dedicated and devoted her years with special needs. Zev, welcome.
Thank you.
So we wanted to, the program we're bringing you today just focuses on business and a number of different developments, trying to help get a compelling message out and allowing businesses to take the risk because there are a tremendous amount of opportunities for them to grow. And with differentiate or stop growing, let's talk a little bit about that.
Okay. So I kind of spun off a title of one of my favorite books. It's actually Differentiate or Die, but I didn't want to come out and be so morbid, and so I kind of adjusted it to differentiate or stop growing. And it really comes down to how do you grow your business in the 21st century, and it's a complete different departure than what all of us are used to. And of course, the game changer is the internet, and the big change in terms of sales, which is really all we do, is that in a previous century, whoever was selling something had the knowledge and the power to know everything there was to know about their product or service. So we had a choice of either accepting what they told us or trying to call someone else. If you fast forward to where we are today, we don't have to believe anyone. We can just use those two and we find everything out. So the world has become transparent. We don't have to believe anything we hear. We can verify it. And what it has done for businesses is really created a requirement for any company to differentiate itself, because to say, you know, if 15 years ago I told you that I'm a leading company and the best in my industry and I have the best price and the best service, you can either believe me and buy from me and either agree or disagree, or just go somewhere else. Today, those kind of statements don't really mean anything anymore. I can say whatever I want, but it's noise. What I tell a lot of my customers is that pretend that we're standing in front of a cloud that contains a whole bunch of people, and there's a lot of noise that's going on there. So the buyer's on the other side, and all of us are in this giant, thick cloud, and all of us are yapping away. You know, I'm great, I'm this, I'm that. What is it that's going to allow you to step through the cloud and be able to face that customer and tell them something of value but different? We can't just be the same as everybody else because it just doesn't work anymore.
All right, let's just jump in a little bit on your bio, which I didn't. And if I didn't say welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get through
I'm here.
greeting and all this fun stuff. Now, you took a company, I believe a medical device company, started, I think, at $3 million. You went to 15, and then 21 through a merger.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that, because obviously that also reigns into exactly what you're sharing and looking at. You're differentiating in order to grow and to become successful.
So the industry was the medical device manufacturing industry. And we were a small family-owned business. It was a third-generation ownership. There were 20 plus of us in New York and maybe 50 in Rhode Island in a manufacturing facility. And we manufactured precision-made medical devices, so needles, medical connectors, etc. It's a highly lucrative industry. There were gazillion competitors, including US-based and overseas-based. And the challenge you face as a family-owned business, so we can talk about what small business is, but for now, I'll refer to it as a family-owned business. So how does a family-owned business company that does about $3 million actually goes out and is able to break through and step out of that cloud and be able to differentiate itself and grow? And that was the challenge. So one of the real challenges that small companies have are resources. So how much of a budget are you going to allocate to marketing, to sales expansion? Are you going to hire direct salespeople or employ indirect salespeople? And those are the tools, those are the logistics. But at the end of the day, in order for you to be known and get mass, you have to be seen. And so in our case, the lucky part for me was that the ownership of the company was embracing the need to take a measured risk and spend money in order to be able to be exposed and be seen. My job was to step aside and say, so how are we different than CNC shops that are everywhere you turn in every city in the US who can theoretically make the same things that we do? And CNC precision manufacturing was just one aspect of what we did. So at the end of the day, and it was a process, that there are multiple parallel things that happen when you set to grow a small company. One is battling the corporate culture. We don't want to grow. We're okay where we are. Two is looking at the world of competitors and saying, oh boy, how do I get there? And three is, of course, money. And fourth is resources, which are personnel. So you have to surround yourself with talented people. You have to have the money to do it. And you have to have the buy-in and the support from your management. So fast forward to how we did this. It was looking back strictly on service. We decided early on that we are going to go above and beyond the call of duty when it came to servicing our customers. It started with when you picked up the phone and you called us. You were greeted professionally. There were no on-hold behaviors where, I'm sorry, everybody's busy, so you're going to sit on hold for 5 minutes. So from minor little things that might not seem important to higher level things, which were follow-up on requests, quick response to requests for returning products, to requests for getting quotations, requests for engineering assistance. Everything moved at a fast speed that some of our larger competitors just couldn't do it. So while everybody else, I think there was a book that was written by someone about Pepsi and Coke, and I think it was called The Other Guy Blinked. That's kind of what we did. While the big companies were chasing the large contracts, we decided to focus more on the medical device startups operations and really embed ourselves into the world of the engineering groups within each one of the companies, because we knew that at some point when a customer decides to put out a project for bid, it's a question of, well, who's got the best price and terms, and that's who wins. We decided that we're going to embed ourselves early on in the product development cycle, which was an engineering prototype. We're going to follow it through its development process. At some point when our volumes went from 5 pieces to 50 to 100 to 1,000, we knew that somewhere down the road it's going to get to volume, and when it gets to volume, the purchasing manager is going to bid out the project. They're going to go out and find other people to do it. But it gave us a huge advantage. We knew how to make the products. The engineer liked our quality. The engineer loved the service. We had continuous visitations to the customer. We were always in touch and in communications with. So when we got to a point where a high volume project had to be quoted, it wasn't just about price. Our price was always better because we knew how to make the part. We knew how to scale up, and we knew what we had to do in order to beat anybody else that came out, outside the realm of what we were in. So it was really the embedding part as well as the rapid service and service at levels that were really unmatched. And the reason I can say that is because we tested and measured ourselves continuously. We didn't want to wait until somebody complained, and we didn't want to wait until somebody said, you did a great job. We continuously tested ourselves with questionnaires, with surveys, with phone calls to ask people, how are we doing? And what came back, in addition to complaints, which we addressed very quickly, allowed us to continuously, incrementally improve our service levels to a point where when we would exhibit at a trade show, people used to come to us and say, how large is your company? We see you everywhere. People are talking about you. And we would say, well, we're only 8 million, 10 million, 7 million. And they would be completely flabbergasted because they thought we were a $50 million company. So essentially, it was taking the components that lead you to growth, which is a buy-in from the ownership and management and committing to a budget, hiring the kind of people that are committed to the culture and what we wanted to accomplish, and then aggressively being out there. And being out there meant we were one of the most aggressive companies that did direct mail, a ton of direct mail. We did 8 to 10 trade shows per year in the U.S. and overseas. Everybody in our industries, which were life sciences as well as medical, that needed to see us, got a chance to meet us. And the key was just meeting someone and exposure doesn't do anything. It's what you do with those leads, what you do with those encounters. So between independent reps, direct salespeople, as well as a real strong home office follow-up, we're able to raise the bar to a level that many companies could meet. And so we had a continuous influx of inquiries and lead generation and orders and new POs. At a point we expanded to Europe, and just a quick correction, it was a company, I opened an office in Germany and we covered 8 countries. Okay. And that was the next big thing for us. Again, small company from the US up against incredible competition in Germany, where their ability to manufacture precision instruments is second to none. We went right back into their territory and offered something that was unusual for the European market.
All right, a number of different things, and we're talking about operation, and this is pretty much what it is, focusing on the core of the operation. One aspect of that is looking at service, looking at the quality of work or that you're putting out to your customers and what they're looking for. We also want to talk about businesses who were actually at the higher end, the opposite. They're 40 million, 21 million, and then they're down to $100,000 because they weren't listening, they weren't looking at. And we understand where service is always key and it's always critical. It's a key component of any business that you're doing. And it's important for you to get the right people and to have them train and so on. And I want to talk a little bit about the ISO certification and a little bit about your background, because I think you're also very much have hands-on in the global market arena as well, which is probably what also contributed to some of the success of launching the company in Germany and then having that running for the other 8 countries that you have. We're about to come up on our first break. Again, thank you for joining us. Again, this is My Business, Your World. I'm your host, Dr. Corinne Graham. If you have any questions for Zev or myself, it is 631-481-9124, or send us an email at info@grahamconsultingandresearch.com. See you in a few. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Welcome again. My Business, Your World, and Dr. Graham with Zev Ash. So just before the break, we're chatting about how that company was able to differentiate and grow. And they focused in on a lot of core, traditional things, aspect of business. And with all the technological advances and resources that we have, it makes certain things more convenient, or you have to be more in the now. But the core is still the same, and it doesn't matter whether you're a mid-size, a large, or a small mom and pop, whatever you want to class your business or your industry. it's still the same things. If you want to be successful, there are certain things that you have to do, and you're looking at your business operation. But before we go back into that, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your background, and let's chat about the ISO certification, because I know that is very critical in a number of things when you're setting up audits and policies and procedures and helping company to differentiate and grow. Let's talk about FIFA, because I think we just passed it, and how involved or how active you are in that here on Long Island.
Well,
because you're licensed.
I was. I carry that. I carry that badge of honor with me, as that ref on the soccer field that hundreds of parents screamed and yelled at. But soccer has been a big thing for me from childhood, having grown up in Israel, and I played at a very high level on one of the Israeli youth teams, and then came to the U.S. and was a soccer goalie for my college. And so years later, I take my daughter, who is in first grade, and we are looking for a place to play soccer. And there was a club in Huntington. And I sat on a sideline quietly, and I watched the practice. And at the end of the practice, I walked over to someone who appeared to be somebody important, and I said, "By the way, are you looking for coaches?" And he looked at me and he said, "Are we looking for coaches? We go to the library on the weekend to learn this game, so do you know anything about it?" So I told him. And, you know, I coached my kids, total of probably 12 to 13 years. We were quite successful in our own right. It was a phenomenal experience. And one of the things that troubled me as a coach and going through that many years at competitive play on Long Island was that the sidelines, i.e. the parents, and some coaches really ruined the game for the kids. It was just, we always used to joke around that the parents are the kids' sports agents. You know, at the age of 11, they're already starting to think about soccer scholarships, which are not going to happen. So when my kids were down and decided to date and chase other things, I needed to be on the field. So I got certified as a FIFA ref. So it was a 3 months, pretty intense course, and the license allowed me to, if I wanted to, ref college games. But I stayed on Long Island, and I kind of went crazy. I was doing 2-3 games on Saturdays, 2-3 games on Sundays, and it was a phenomenal experience. And as a player and as a coach, I remember one of the instructors that worked with us, who was a international referee, said, you know, whether you play the game or you coach the game, when you step out in that field, it's a completely different perspective from the middle out to the sides. And it was true. And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do as a one person. And I was running. I was always telling, you know, the players as well as the coaches, here are the rules. I'm going to run. I'm never going to be away from the ball more than 2 feet. So you guys play, and I'll ref. And I would look at the coaches and say, if you're going to call an offside call from all the way there while I'm by the ball, I'm just going to take out my yellow card, and the next one, you're going to go home. Because I wanted to create an environment that allowed the kids to play and we can really enjoy the game, because it's a great game. So I did it for 3 years, and my last game was a U18 Division I for the championship. Incredible talent. It was a 2-ref system, so it was me and another guy, and it was incredibly stressful to do it. And that's when I decided, you know what, maybe I'm too old for this.
I bring it up for a couple of different reasons. I'm not much of the sports fan, but I follow and I here or there, especially when, you know, it's a peak season, when it's championships and playoffs and so on. And while the soccer season was going on, and I did a piece as well about when you think about the strategies that they have to, and a lot of the underdog in this last World was really amazing. Even it's a relatively newer sport in the U.S. still. It's been around for a couple of years, but it's still relatively new. In the international arena, it's been around for forever. Now, the strategies that, especially for me, I talked about the U.S. team, that they took on in terms of the diversity and the team that they had was really, really quite phenomenal. And this is going back to looking at operations. Same thing you're talking about. You're right here where you can see what's going on. If you did X, you're going to put, do Y, because it makes sense. So even in business, when you're thinking about things, it's things that you're passionate about sometimes. It's just going back to those core and looking to see how they function and they work. So let's talk about your background a little bit, and let's talk about the ISO certification.
So my first name gives it all away. I am an immigrant, naturalized citizen. Spent about 22 years of my life in Israel. Went through, grew up in the country, served in the military, had my dreams to always come to the U.S. and go to college. And so I did. I have an undergraduate in psychology and stuck around, got an MBA in marketing, went back for a couple of years, and that's kind of when I started my professional business career in the high-tech world of Israel. But in 1985, I came back here. So in terms of academic background, psychology and MBA in marketing, some people say they're related. I'm still trying to figure it out. But the interesting part was from a fairly young age, I was obsessed with the human brain. And when I decided to pursue psychology, it wasn't to be a therapist. It was really to really understand the brain. I think it's the most incredible thing we carry around all day. It's just amazing. So in fast forwarding my infatuation with the human brain and how things work, it took a second seat to my infatuation with how people make decisions, particularly in the business world. And so I elected to spend my career in the small business environment because I wanted to be visible, I wanted to be exposed. I knew that in the small business world, if I wore multiple hats and I was good, I would move up much faster than in a typical corporate environment where you have to climb the ladder and move from the cubicle to the corner to, I just didn't have the patience to do it. So the interesting part is that psychology never left me. I'm still very much obsessed with the human brain, but I'm equally obsessed with how people make decisions, especially in the business world.
Well, they do kind of go hand in hand. You're studying because of that passion and that natural fascination with the brain. It is what helps to tell you what's going to differentiate, what kind of marketing strategies, what patterns, or what's really going to work for that. So I think that gives you an advantage because it's something that you're naturally very good at.
I think so the good news is I'm still very much obsessed with it. The bad news, I haven't really come along or progressed too much from I can't figure it out. There's a lot I have figured out in terms of the human behavior. I have no rationale as to why we do things we do. I've got a whole bunch figured out when it comes to small business owners. But I remember that I used to write, when I was writing essays in college, in psychology, I always ended them the same way. And I think I wrote that the day that human beings are going to figure out how the human brain works is the end of civilization as we know it. And don't know why I wrote that. I think I have some ideas. But it's kind of scary. So you know where we're going with genomics, and if we can figure out how the brain works and actually start controlling it, because that's our natural tendency is to take over and control things, it gets to be pretty scary. But I am very far from figuring anything out.
Well, we always are continually learning. You learn something new every day, and it's always fascinating with all the resources and advancement that we've made. I find, and history's proven, that we haven't really done too many things that are new or that inventive. They were there before. We've improved on them to make them more convenient for a growing population. Now tell me about an individual that has influenced you in your career.
Well, there's two things. Maybe that's a cliched answer about my father, and I'll tell you why. My father had a grocery store in Israel. Worked, I used to say he worked like a dog. We'd be up at 4:30 in the morning, getting the fresh milk and the fresh rolls so that people in the area would come in the morning and buy fresh things to have breakfast. In business term, his territory was literally 2 blocks in any direction from where the store was. And by the way, we lived right on top of our store, which was very common and still common in many countries. And he worked hard. He was uneducated. He was a baker to begin with. I don't know how he wound up with a grocery store, but he did. And so in a 2-block radius, there are apartment buildings, 4 to 5 stories high, and that's your target audience, that's your population. And they all come down and they shop at the store because that's the concept of a local grocery store. And so years later, when we're trying to figure out how brilliant our parents were, but we completely missed it, his behavior and the way that he served his clients is kind of what imprinted on me, but I didn't realize it at the time. And on one hand, it was a question of survival. So one thing that I remember as an 8-year-old boy, because I always stood around the store and people were coming in and out, there was a woman that was married to a doctor. And she came down and asked for a particular piece of deli meat that was quite expensive. And my father didn't have it. And she started berating him. And it's like, I am a wife of a doctor. How come you don't have this stuff for me? And my father had tears in his eyes. It's amazing. So he looked at her and asked her what she was doing. She said, well, I'm going to go home. And he said, okay, so give me an hour and we'll meet you at your apartment. He jumped on a bicycle. He drove the equivalent of probably 10 avenues in Manhattan to the other side of town, bought the meat, came home, sliced it, ran up the stairs, delivered it to her, didn't ask her to pay for it, and came down. So on one hand, it's survival. Why? Because she was influential. She was a wife of a doctor, and she had a big mouth. And if she started telling everybody in the neighborhood that my father's store didn't have the right products for her or the service was bad, all the people had to do in that same building was make a left instead of a right. And 2 blocks over, there was another grocery store. And my father was very sensitive to it. He was a very proud person to begin with. So the service aspect was necessity as well as pride. And I watched him do things like this all the time. And I remember going to him and always saying, why don't we just buy a bookstore? Isn't that so much easier than to get up at 4:30 in the morning and work till 8 o'clock at night? And but he was able to expand the store. We're actually a fairly decent sized store for our neighborhood. He provided for me and my mother. It was okay, but that imprinted on me. So fast forward, I met Jen Sussman years later, and he is taking me away from another company. And we sit down, and he's giving me the offer that's typical in the American stories. So I need you to come work for me. Tell me what you want. And I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. So we started to negotiate to some extent. And when we were done, I looked at him and I said, do you think I can have this in writing? And Jen clenched his teeth, looked at me and said, no. So years later, I find out, because I did go to work for him, that when he clenched his teeth, that was the equivalent of another owner screaming, yelling, throwing something at you. And he looked at me and said, very, very calmly, there are 350 employees here. Now one of them has anything in writing for me.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
We'd come back to it. Just give me a quick, we just wrap to go to the next break. This is My Business, Your World, Dr. Graham. Thank you for joining us again, My Business, Your World with Dr. Graham and my guest, Zev Ash. So we want to pick up back from where your second influencer on your career and clenching teeth and getting something in writing.
So I asked Jen, as he made me an offer to work for him, if I can have it in writing. He clenched his teeth and he said, there are 350 employees here, not one of them has anything in writing for me. And would you like to know why? And I said, sure. And he said, because if my word to my employees means nothing. They can still come to work every day, but they're not really working for me. And then he looked at me and he said, the reason I do this is not because of money. I have all the money that I need. My kids are all set. I do this because there are 350 employees that are dependent on me for their future. And that's why I come to work every day. And that's why my word, my handshake, whatever I told you will happen. Otherwise, what's the point? And it was an incredibly refreshing way to look at ownership and business. But the greatest part was that he lived up to everything he said. So clearly, whatever he promised took place. And I was relocated to Long Island. Was supposed to buy a house. I was very naive about it. I started looking, and I came back to him one day and I said, I don't think I can afford a house here. And he said, don't worry about it. You know, when it comes to real estate, things happen. You just squeeze and you make it happen. 2 weeks later, there was a big mistake in my paycheck, and I walked over and I said, there was an error, and he said, no, there isn't. I just gave you a $20,000 raise because, and so on one hand,
I'd like that job.
Jen, I would still be working for him. On one hand, Jen was the absolute toughest person I ever worked for. He was incredibly demanding. He would not compromise, and was very blunt about what he wanted and how he wanted it. But he was equally as generous. And so at the end of the day, when we work for someone and we spend more times awake with that person than with our family, then the one thing I always wanted was the comfort and the peace of mind knowing that if anything ever happened, that I needed to go to my boss and ask for help, that I could count on him. And that's the kind of man he was. And one of the best examples that I've ever given to people is that, and this is, by the way, the biggest company I worked for, so it's 350 employees. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the sprinkler system failed in a fairly big building in Roslyn. And the place was flooding. The pipe burst, the sprinkler, and there was a phone chain at 3 o'clock in the morning from the director of operation to people and said, could you come help? We have towels, bring towels, whatever it is you do. We have to contain this. And I was there. There were close to over 200 people at 3 o'clock in the morning in the building, cleaning up and helping out. So how many employees do you know that when their phone rings at 3 a.m. and they can see, now again, I don't think there was caller ID, but how many people are going to actually pick up the phone and say, I'll be right there? Not many. But that's what Jan accomplished. And for me, working with him very closely and watching how he ran the business from a business standpoint, how the corporate culture we had and how he treated employees and what he believed in was incredibly inspirational for me. So for me, that's the way you run a business.
Couple of quick things. Know you're an avid movie person. I'm not really, but I saw a film I tweeted about. Let's jump into.
Yeah.
The fact is, how many businesses are actually doing that? Same principles, similar with your father and stuff.
Very few.
Some are coming back to and they're trying to, but not at the end of the day. Now, this movie that I watched kind of embodies a little bit of what you're sharing with your dad. And I like these older movies because they have so much value and they still live through today, meaning the same thing looking at operation. I think it's Father Walked Away or something like that. It was back in 1935. And long story short, he ran the business, his wife passed on, he took it a little hard, took a break, the boys were running, and you know, it was experience in life doing things so and so forth. He had agreed to certain things for about 100 or 200 employees that he had. Big sale was coming up, his store was on strike, he saw it in the news by chance, tried to get back. But one of the things that he said that resonated, he said, you know, with his older son, is that you have this, but you have to have this too, which is, it's true. It doesn't matter what it is that you're doing for your business to be successful. You have to. And that's why when I say you're having a psychology degree and focusing, you're understanding those key components because people are what makes business run or make it successful or effective.
Which is, to me, and again, I'm full-bred Yankee by now. I'm an American, but live in two worlds because I've I've seen the other side or another culture. I've traveled extensively around the world, and it's interesting, and that's the things that I can't figure out. Why is it that when you do an acquisition and you buy another company, clearly the biggest asset you're buying are the people that made that company grow.
Mm-hmm.
And the American story is you buy them, you tell them, don't worry, nothing's going to change, and 6 months later everybody gets fired. And you consolidate your resources, and you save shareholders a lot of money, and more often than not, those acquisitions wind up being not a great
Yes.
story. And a similar thing happened to us, not quite as dramatic as that, but I think that what the 21st century world, where we're all connected and everything is transparent, is going to do to businesses is go back to the connections, go back to the individual connection with your clients, with your customers, with your employees, and recognizing that technology by itself does not create success. It's a tool. And behind it, there's still people. And they're not really replaceable, even at the level of anywhere you look at.
And with robotics and the advancement of technology, you still need people.
I was always joking because we had a cleaning guy at the company we're talking about who vacuumed the office and then walked around with one of these feather things and dusted things. And what he picked up by walking around dusting was much more insightful and had more wisdom than at times the owners of the company. And we would know that because he would come out of the blue with a question and people would say, but he's a cleaning guy. How did he pick that up? But he did. And because he was connected to the employees and he listened and he was neutral and he was able to see through things that none of us saw because we're too immersed in it.
Right. Talk about challenges for small businesses. Let's talk about at least two, and then we'll go into SEOs, because I know that's something that you're very big on.
So I think from my experience, having been 2.5 years, going on 3 of being an entrepreneur and having my own company and working with business owners, as well as looking at my own career and working for small businesses, I think that the biggest challenge small businesses face is indecision. It's something's not broke, don't fix it. But in reality, a lot of things are broken. We just tend to ignore them. But it's the inability to make a decision and just do it. And that's challenge number one, because indecision leads to nowhere. So if you're not going to change anything, if you're not going to do anything different, if you're not going to want to be different and better than your competitors, because you really have to today, then not making the decision is pretty much not just holding you at the same position. The rest of the world is moving forward. So you're not stationary. You're really getting left behind. It's differentiate or stop growing, differentiate or die. The only way you get to differentiate is by taking a really hard look at how your operation is, your industry, your competitors, your internal operations, your culture, everything else, and drawing conclusions from doing something. But doing nothing, to me, is the biggest challenge that small business owners face. And
I want to throw a sidebar in.
Yeah.
When we're talking about this, we're going to talk about, I talk about taking the risk and getting a compelling message with the tons of information that's there. That could be one aspect of the indecisiveness. So we can sidebar that and chat about it a little later if we have some time, or come back to it, because there's tons of information out there. How do you make that decision? It's probably one of the challenges that they're coming up against. So I'm sorry, please continue.
So indecision is one. The other one is really the lack of wanting to take a risk. So you can say that's part of indecision, that might be something that's driving indecision. But that part is really the human psychology. We're in our comfort zone. We don't want to go outside our comfort zone, and so let's make do with what we have. Of course, what's hovering in the The big guillotine that's hovering over everybody's head is the money thing, because what kind of decisions can you make today that don't involve some sort of an investment? And so it's easier to do nothing and then you don't spend any money. Is that really the right decision to make? Well, we know from having worked for successful companies, have observed companies that fail, and just general knowledge, that that's the kiss of death. If you're not doing anything about your business, for whatever reason, and we can pick one of 150 reasons why business owners don't make decisions, at the end of the day, you're going to be left behind as everybody else. Not every company makes decisions, and it doesn't have to be a life-changing decision that the company does. So I believe in incremental changes, in incremental progress. Take one step at a time. It's working, then let's go to step 2. You don't have to go and throw everything you've accustomed to and you learn it's working and say, okay, let's start from scratch. That's not what's required. But ultimately it's about not wanting to take the risk, and so the indecision is the comfort zone. Well, we'll just continue the way we are, and of course behind the scene is, if I don't have to spend money, then why should I spend it? And that's incredibly, this stuff is in my face all day, because what I do for a living is try to convince business owners to make decisions. Mm-hmm. So that's becoming it's fitting into my obsessions of why wouldn't you make that decision?
If you don't risk anything, doesn't matter whether it's personal or it's professional being business, you risk even more. You have to. Everything is based mm-hmm. on taking that initial step of taking that risk. Before you were able to walk or run around or so on, you had to take that first step to see where it got you. And you continue with those momentum, so therefore anything you're going to implement, if you're apprehensive about it, you have to do the baby step, because you have to be comfortable and you have to look at your operation to see what really will work for you. And most of the times you know that. I want to talk a little bit about SEOs, but if you want to, we can chat and just wrap this up a little mm-hmm. bit, because I think this ties into the overload of information that's there. And I think we're probably coming up on a break soon. So let's wrap up with that, then we'll come back. We'll talk about SEOs a little bit. Okay? All right, so sure. Let's talk about the information overload.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing that we have access to almost everything? Other than the fact that we're tied to a cell phone, and if we're not on a cell phone, we're on an iPad, and emails are coming in, and social media is coming in, and we're bombarded with stuff, and we've become addicted to it. And so at the end of the day, the question is, how do I make a rational decision based on everything that's hitting me in the face all day? And so one way to make a rational decision is to decide to do nothing. I don't know, I can't figure this out, so I'm just going to stay with what I have. Very, very common. I run into this a lot. So on one hand, technology has allowed us to become incredibly smart very quickly by having access to information. And on the other hand, it's so overwhelming that we just back off because we can't handle it. And by the way, the human brain is not a device or an instrument that can handle multitasking. That is one of the biggest fallacies that was ever created, and we can pick that up if you want after that.
Yes, please, because, yeah, not necessarily these devices make you smarter or not. We'll chat about it. Come into the next break. We'll continue with that, and we'll pick up with SEO. Again, this is My Business, Your World. I'm Dr. Graham. Our number is 631-481-9124. Or you can send us an email if you have any questions at info@Graham Consulting and Research. We'll see you in a few. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. My Business, Your World, Dr. Graham with Zev Ash. We were just chatting about information overload, and let's get into jargons. Mm-hmm. Let's chat about that.
So one of the unfortunate byproducts of this information overload is that some people feel compelled to differentiate themselves by coming up with terminology or jargon that make them seem really intelligent, intellectual, or different, but in reality it just serves to confuse everybody else. So, in my world, there are things like blue ocean strategy. Okay, if If I talk to a small business owner and I tell them about Blue Ocean Strategy, they're going to look at me and say, "What are you talking about? Are we going fishing?" and and so, again, back to why do we do this? And my world and the world of my father and what I believe in, despite the MBA and having an extensive IT background, and I'm a geek and I love technology, my philosophy is simple is better.
Yes.
Let's just water it down and let's
I
stick to
agree.
basics, because the interesting part is you take marketing as a term that's now being spun around everywhere else. So we have marketing, brand marketing, email marketing, web marketing, social media marketing. Everything has got the word attached to it that's marketing. And not really the case. So sometimes people ask me, what's marketing about to begin with? And I said, it never changed from day one when I opened Marketing 101. And it's really the same thing. It's identify what your customers are looking for, give them a solution, provide them a fair price with good quality, make sure that they're happy, and then repeat. That's it. So we created a huge industry of jargon-based industry to appear to be more sophisticated than the next guy, where in reality, it's really down to what I just said. It's simple. Find out who your target customers are. Understand what it is that they need. Go back home and figure out whether you can deliver it. And if you can't, then find a way to do that. Then identify how you're going to do this and deliver those solutions to your customers in a way that differentiates you. Not like the competitor, not like the guy next door. And so when people say, I'm a leading company of such and such, okay, so you're a leader in your own mind. Is it substantiated? So my world is about questioning everything. And the reason I question everything is because that's where our customers do today. They just don't believe the jargon. They don't believe the stuff that gets thrown at them that say, okay, so you're the leader? Tell me how. When was the last time you were ranked? So what do you mean you're a leader? Leader compared to who? And so the era we live in today really require us to shed off the nonsense. And go back to being transparent, go back to core, and core is not complicated. It's simple.
Yes.
What can I do for you? Let me do this for you at the utmost way, service I can provide. I don't want you to come back and complain. And if you do, by the way, I want to be able to be very professional about it, address the complaint, and fix it for you.
Right.
It's not that complicated. The rest of the stuff that we play around with all day, yes, some of which is technology, some of which is complex, social media marketing. Okay, so I have Facebook. Is that marketing? Not really. It's pretty complicated. Websites, everybody thinks that they have a website, then they're in business. You're not. Your website is incredibly complicated. And I call websites your business DNA. I'm able to tell everything I need to know about any company through their website. It's amazing, but you can drill down and get behind the words and understand exactly what's behind the website. Right. So that's information overload jargon.
Yeah, and jargons oftentimes too have different meaning when we talking about cultural diversity and crossing, being in a global market. It can mean the difference in being successful in another market than the one that you're in, and where that jargon or those jargons are synonymous. Let's talk about SEO.
I wanted to pick just one thing that we left off before, which was multitasking.
Yeah.
So this was something that was invented by some business person, and everybody in the business world used it to shrink their workforce and say, okay, since Corinne can multitask, well, she can now do the work of 3 people, not just one, so we can get rid of 2. But as a student of psychology and neuroscience, and this is not me because it's substantiated, the human brain is not equipped to function on a multitasking level. It's just simple. That's the fact. That's beyond it. There's research to substantiate it. So when we think that we can walk around, think about what we need to do tomorrow, look at our cell phone and read a text message, and at the same time listen to music and figure out what we're going to have for dinner, maybe we think we're doing it, but the issue is not really whether we're doing it or not, but are we doing any of those functions
Wow.
optimally.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies in business. So, my world is marketing. If you're going to throw everything against the wall and multitask your marketing function, are you really going to be successful, as opposed to pick the ones that work and focus on it, make it the best you can. So that was it.
All right. So let's talk about ISO, and
Right.
then let's talk about Lazida,
Mhm.
and let's
And SEO. Okay.
Yeah, just any words of wisdom you want to pass on to
So,
our
so
audience.
we were a U.S.-based manufacturer, and when you do manufacturing, quality is critical, obviously, to how you do things. And in the U.S., manufacturing had to comply with what's called GMP, General Manufacturing Practices. But we started to look at internationally as a market, and internationally there's a group called the International Standards Organization, ISO, that developed standards in Europe that eventually were coming to the U.S., because if you wanted to export parts to Europe, you had to comply with ISO requirements.
Mm-hmm.
It started as a safety specification, and it really always centered around quality.
Mm-hmm.
So, like every U.S. manufacturer, we adopted the ISO quality system way before we paid attention to the GMP, the U.S.-based stuff, because we all wanted, first of all, it was more reputable, but the second aspect was, if you wanted to market overseas, you needed that stamp. So what the ISO certification process did for all of us was train us to think quality in every aspect of the business that we did. So it wasn't just about how do you make the part on a CNC machine by setting up the program and doing first release, a first item check, etc. No, we looked at ISO from every aspect of the company, from how we processed the PO to how we answered the phone. We had a procedure for handling complaints, and our brain got rewired to thinking quality, and quality really meant upgrading our way of doing business to a point where we're untouchable, because we were thinking continuous improvement, nonstop.
Well, we're coming up on our last part
Okay.
of the show. Sorry. Let's just wrap up really quickly about Lazida, if you could, in 30 seconds or so that we can, and just a little bit about the company.
Okay.
I'm sure if you have the time, you can grace us again, and we can chat some more about all these fun things that affect business.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my guest today is Mr. Zev Ash, and it's 631-481-9124. Send us an email at info@grahamconsultingandresearch.com. Just any takeaways and a little bit about Lazida.
So, Laddaza provides outsourced business development services. And again, in staying true to my differentiate, we're not consultants, we're not coaches, we're outsourced business development. And one of the misconceptions of the term business development is it's associated too often with sales. For me, in my career, business development was a function of 4 different very important critical areas: marketing, sales, customer service, and your referring network within your industry. And so we come in and work with business owners, hands-on, in the company, collaborate, develop content, work on strategies, train salespeople, train customer service, and really take the company to, without being cliche, to the next level, because they now have an infusion of tremendous amount of small business marketing and sales experience that allows them to see things differently.
All right. Well, I'm sorry but we have to cut. Thank you again for being
Sure.
on the show, and we hope to be able to have you join us again.
My pleasure.